Hello and welcome to a look at H1Z1. Now this is Sony's early access zombie survival game and it's an MMO. Yes, it is like DayZ, in fact it's incredibly like DayZ. But imagine a version of DayZ that's actually made by a proper MMO publisher. And you can tell the difference when it comes to things like this server menu. It shows you all the options on the server, what rules it's running, because you can have PvE servers and PvP servers or Battle Royale servers. I think Battle Royale is without zombies and it's just players versus players. PvP servers is players versus zombies. And PvE servers is players versus zombies. And then there are a few restrictions. So there's servers where you can't switch out of first person view. There are servers where you lose all your crafting recipes when you die. And there are servers where only headshots count. So you've got quite a few options in the basic setup. I'm sure there'll be more later on. Now Sony haven't an entirely smooth launch. There were problems with Steam when it first went up on early access, and there's also been problems with lag and the actual login system. But most of those have been sorted. It's still not fully fixed, but it's getting there. But as you can see, loading times are really good. And it's a very good looking game. Now it's using the same engine as PlanetSide 2, so we know PlanetSide 2's engine is pretty good. That can handle a couple of thousand people all doing FPS combat against each other, so the engine is pretty reliable. They have cut some corners on the graphics. You'll notice mainly when you get to things like blackberry bushes, where the actual blackberries are flat, so you get a nice picture of blackberries from one side, move 90 degrees and you see them edge on because it's just a flat picture of blackberries. So there are some shortcuts in there, but like I say, this is an early access game on its first day of release, and as you can see, it's a pretty spectacular looking game. I haven't changed any of the settings on this. This is the standard settings, and I'm getting about 75 frames a second out of the game. And that's with DxTory running doing the recordings. Now this recording's only at 30 frames per second, so that's why it's not going to look as good as it does to me. If you consider that DayZ is about 4 years old, DayZ Standalone is a year old, and this is a day old, I think you can see that Sony have done a pretty good job of getting their game out and looking good. The only real issue I've had playing the game is the input lag, which is when you interact with objects there's a bit of a delay before you actually get the result. Sometimes it can be like 2 or 3 seconds. It's a bit annoying, but Sony know what the problem is and they're working on it. In fact, Sony have thrown themselves at this. Even though it's early access, they launched 4 different fixes on day one. So it seems Sony are going to be putting a lot of effort behind H1Z1. Now if you're wondering why this deer is just standing there and letting me punch it, it's because they've turned off some of the AI aspects of the animals and zombies, so there's no fight or flight instinct in the animals at the moment, and that's just to make it easier for people running around at the start. This isn't what the AI of the animals is going to be like, but as you can see, the animations of the animals are really good, and there's some good texture work on the fur. Unfortunately, I don't have a knife or an axe or anything sharp, so I can't actually loot this deer. So if you're out in the woods at the moment, this game is the ultimate blackberry picking and stick finding simulator. Pretty much all you can do in the woods. But blackberries may well be the most powerful resource in the game at the start, because you eat a blackberry, you get 2 food and 2 water from it. So this thing can keep you alive as you're going through the game, and there are a ton of blackberry bushes and the blackberries regrow. But you can probably see what I mean about the cheat on the blackberries themselves. They're just pictures of blackberries stuck on the outside of a bush. So I've jumped a bit quite a lot in the gameplay here because I arrived in this town at night and really wanted to show you it in the day in the video, so I've jumped forward quite a bit, and as you can see I've got an axe and I found quite a bit of stuff wandering around the town. So pretty much everything in the town is actually searchable. So you can look through wrecked cars, you can go through all the buildings, you can look in all the cupboards and all the dressers and armoires and cabinets and all that kind of stuff. Pretty much anything that looks like it should be something that holds an item can hold an item. Now most of them are going to be empty, but you can search through pretty much everything. In fact, some of the office buildings will take you forever to look through. It's a bit different to DayZ, where you'd get some furniture in a room and you couldn't really interact with it. In H1Z1 you can look through pretty much anything. And a lot of the objects in the world are interactive. So if you've got a crowbar, you can run up to a wrecked car, whack it with a crowbar and get scrap metal from it. Or if you run up to a crate, you can prize planks off it, or you can get planks from a crate, or often loot drops from a crate, by hitting it with an axe. And of course, if you've got an axe, you can chop down trees and get logs. And the most surprising thing for me about starting off with H1Z1 was how developed the crafting system was. Now, I'm not going to go through the crafting system in detail, but it is kind of all done from the inventory screen. You've got all your items down the right hand side. Very similar to DayZ, you need backpacks. To craft things you need the items and you need a recipe. And you get a new recipe by dragging your items into this discovery window, and then it will give you clues as to how many recipes there are for those objects, and any object that might work with it will show up in white on that right hand side. And you can basically combine objects in there or have a single object in there, and it will create new recipes if you've got the right combination, that is. So here's a very basic example of it in action. I walk into this house and there's a rabbit sitting in the kitchen. So I attack the rabbit with my axe. It's a very tough rabbit, I will have to say, but eventually I'm going to kill the rabbit. Sorry for anybody who's a vegetarian, but it's a zombie apocalypse out there and I needs food. Now I actually think this rabbit is this hard to kill because I'm on a headshots only server, and it must apply to the animals as well as the zombies. But eventually Mr. Rabbit will go down, and then pull out my knife and get the rabbit meat. So everything in the crafting system seems pretty logical. You need something sharp to get the meat from a rabbit. You need an axe to chop down a tree, to get logs, to get planks, all that kind of stuff. It's all pretty logical and it all goes together. So once you have your rabbit meat, you can then go into the discovery system, put the rabbit meat into one of the windows, and it will tell you there's a recipe for it. And it's cooked rabbit. So it's a very basic recipe. If you've got a campfire and some rabbit, you will get cooked rabbit. So I guess the one thing I haven't really talked about is the zombies. And the reason for that is there has been quite a bit of lag on the servers at the start. This zombie here is a bit of a lag monster. And you can attack zombies with axe, whack them in the head, and like I say, their UI was pretty dumb. Then they turned up the zombies UI a bit and they let the zombies drop loot, which they weren't doing originally. So I thought, right, I'll do a bit of scouting around and then I'll go for this zombie because he's gonna have some stuff on him now. So get out my axe and start whacking the zombie, and the zombie starts fighting back, which they weren't doing before. So get into a scrap with this zombie, going for his head with my axe because this is a headshot only server. Zombie's lagging a bit, I think, but you know, this is pretty much a zombie fight. And I get a loot bag. Unfortunately, what's in the loot bag I can't actually pick up because it's another backpack. So I decide to shred it to get some cloth. And I'm bleeding while I'm standing here. But the UI enhancement also means that zombies will come at you if you attack a zombie. And even though there's another player here, I'm about to get jumped by a zombie while trying to craft. So one thing you shouldn't do is craft right over the top of a corpse of a zombie, because apparently that will get you killed by the next zombie that comes along. There he is. My health's pretty low and I get whacked by a zombie. So although the zombies are pretty basic in the game at the moment. As you can see, they now do start hunting players if you attract their attention. It seems the way to attract their attention at the moment is to attack another zombie. So that's it. That's a quick look at H1Z1 on day one of early access. And for a day one early access game, I think it's pretty polished. Servers need a bit of work, but Sony are doing that, and it shouldn't be an issue because, like I say, this is the same engine that runs PlanetSide 2, and that has a lot more players on it. Is it worth getting H1Z1 at the moment? Well, it does cost if you want to join the early access. I paid £14.99 for the basic version, or you can pay £29.99 for the premium version. Premium version gets you some stuff that I don't quite understand. It's got crates and airdrops and stuff that I didn't really want. But general rule of thumb on H1Z1 is if you like DayZ, then you'll like H1Z1. If you liked DayZ but didn't like being ganked by other players, you'll like H1Z1 because you can go PvE only. If you don't like games that are not finished and you have to sit around and watch their development, then don't buy H1Z1 because it is early access, and you do have to pay for this early access. When H1Z1 is released, it will be free to play with microtransactions to buy things like these loot crates and airdrops and supply drops and stuff like that. But the basic game is going to be free to play. But the best way to think of H1Z1 is DayZ with a proper developer and some money behind it. So, that gives you a general idea of what to expect, and thanks for watching.